Ian Baldwin, Chair of the Gawler River Floodplain Management Authority, thanks for speaking with us on Flow.
Good to join you, Ricky.
Now, I understand you've had a meeting just recently with your constituent councils. Could you just give us a bit of background first about why the authority was created and when it was created?
Sure. The authority was established in 2002 and it indeed represents 6 constituent councils, the Adelaide Plains Council, Adelaide Hills Council, Barossa, Gawler, Light Region Council, and also Playford Council. And it was established for the purpose of coordinating the planning, construction, operation and maintenance of flood mitigation infrastructure in the Gawler River. But it has other functions associated with that.
Yeah, so the pointy end of that is to ensure that when there is a flood event that we don't end up with a situation where there's flooding of houses or other damage of other infrastructure.
Yes, that's correct. We have, in the Gawler River, we experience a major flooding event once every 10 years, and that's from history collated over 160 years.
Yeah, and the last such event was inside the last 10 years, or has it been a bit longer than that?
The last event was 2016, so we're now 5 years down the track, into our 5th year, down the track from that flood event, so we can expect to receive another event within the next 5 years. It could happen tomorrow. We can't be that precise, but it could happen at any time.
Yeah, and so we've got in touch with you because we've picked up there's been this conversation across the levels of government about a fairly significant amount of works needed on the floodplain to minimise the impacts of flood whenever we do have that next event. Could you give us some background on the cost and scope of the projects that the authority needs funded?
The authorities has 2 projects that are its prime focus. One is the delivery of the Northern Floodway project, which provides some protection for flooding events in the lower reaches of the Gawler River. That project has an estimated value of close to $40 million, with some revised estimates that we've received just recently. We also have a larger project which looks at raising the Bruce Eastick North Para Flood Mitigation Dam by 10 metres in height to provide flood protection in a 100-year event.
Yep.
The cost of that work can be up to $90 million.
Wow, and so the messages we've picked up from councils in the context of the $40 million project is even that's going to be quite hard for councils to come up with on their own. What's the funding mix with these types of projects when they've happened in other places?
It varies, but if we look at the proposal that we have in moving forward with this project, in advocating for assistance from state and federal governments, it's a minimum of a 1/3 contribution from each of the levels of government. But what the Gawler River Flood Management Authority is looking at is, in terms of the capital cost, to look at a 50% contribution from both state and federal government, with, of course, the constituent councils or the authority then picking up the ongoing costs for operation and maintenance of that infrastructure, which is quite considerable, particularly if you're looking at a lifetime commitment.
Yep, so for argument's sake, if there was a $40 million fixed cost, that would be potentially $20 million from the state government, $20 million from the federal, but then the authority through its constituent councils would pick up the running cost, in perpetuity.
Yes, that's correct. For councils, bearing in mind that 5 of the 6 councils are fairly small, with not very large rate bases, it's difficult to find the funds that would support these projects.
Is there an approach between councils or a formula as to who contributes what, or is it a completely equal split between all of the councils? You've got Adelaide Hills Council at the head of the river, if you like, and you've got the Adelaide Plains sort of getting down the bottom.
Yes, our charter provides a formula which identifies the potential capital contribution from each of the councils based on the size of the councils, the length of waterway that they have going through the area, the contributions to flow, the avoided costs, what's the benefit to those councils, and of course whether the council has the ability to contribute capital for those funds.
Yeah.
That formula is currently being reviewed. The Charter has identified the need for that review to be undertaken, and we're working through modelling of that formula at the present time. And in fact, this morning's meeting agreed that we should run the model and see what the impact of that revised formula might be.
Well, we've been picking up recently, we looked across the Australian Bureau of Statistics data across our broadcast area in 3 states and which areas were the fastest growing in each state. And the Two Wells, Virginia, Anglevale, they are in South Australia over the last year the fastest growing areas in South Australia residentially in terms of population. So it does seem that this is becoming an increasingly important project because there's so many more people living in the floodplain.
Yes, that's correct. And if we look back at 2016, the damages to property and equipment and production loss were quite considerable, in excess of $40 million. So you multiply that out each time you have a large event, the costs become considerable.
Yep.
What we're looking to do is provide a solution, a one-off cost that hopefully will provide the protection that's needed to prevent those recurring flood damages.
Yeah, it does seem that you've got a scenario where you've got those figures are fairly neat in the sense that the cost of one flood event is what needs to be spent in capital works to prevent that cost of one flood event apart from the ongoing maintenance costs. If they spend the capital cost once, they can prevent those sorts of events happening in future.
It seems like a fairly simple argument to have, but of course that is not the case. We need to, we're working with state government on some projects that they've recently allocated funds for within the Gawler River, but they're separate to our primary purpose of pursuing the NFP, Northern Floodway Project, and also, the further project to look at the Bruce Eastick Dam.
Yeah, raising the wall, 10 metres, I think you said.
That's correct,
yeah.
Yes.
So when you mentioned the timeline, once in 10 years sort of a regular flood event tends to happen, and we're talking about still at this stage funding, let alone the time it would take to construct a dam, is it foreseeable that with 5 years to go in a 10-year timeline, we wouldn't get these facilities constructed within the next 5 years when we still haven't worked out the funding?
Yeah, there's still quite a lot of work to be done on the project to raise the dam wall. Our focus is more on the NFP, Northern Floodway Project, and making sure that we can get some work started on that.
That's what my comments were.
Within the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's what my comments were directed at, was the NFP.
Yeah.
Is that is there a timeline or a deadline, in a rough one, in your sense, that we need to get the funding sorted and work constructed on the NFP so it's done within the next 5 years? We're
currently working through the provision of a stormwater management plan, which has been requested by the state government before it will consider any potential funding for that project for the capital cost of the NFP. It's likely that that's going to take up to 12 months to complete. We're hoping that it's sooner rather than later. But once that work's complete, we can then start to work more closely with state government, federal government, look at the funding model for that project. We can start to call tenders and look at commencement of works.
Yeah, Ian, look, thanks for going into all that detail for us. It's something we're going to need to keep tracking to make sure that we do end up with some funding commitments and it ultimately works before we do have a major flood event.
Yes, we're very keen, obviously, to get things underway. We would have liked to have been a little bit further advanced than we are at this point in time, but that's the situation we have. But we're moving as fast as we possibly can, and as I said, our focus is to get that work completed ASAP.
Yep. Ian, thanks for speaking with us on Flow today.
All right, Ricky, thanks for the opportunity.